Easy come, easy go, everybody knows. Still we chase it, won't leave it alone. The ways of our time, my mind's always blown away. He wants me, I want him, it could be simple. We taught baby names, we talked about issues like socioeconomics, race, poverty and stuff. Though it ain't enough, wish I could know how far we could go. Wish I could know how far we could go. Wish I could know how far.
Yes, everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Yes, we made it through to the middle of the week. Yes, we are making it through this week. And we are in fact still in a quarantine state. Some of us, I know some states are planning, they're just basically planning slowly to open up to the world, to open up in their state. And, some are against it and some say, well, about goddamn time. But, how do you all feel about that? How do you all feel about, your state, wherever you're at, or even in the world? Because my podcast is listened to all over the world. So how do you feel about your state or country or wherever you're at opening up now? Opening up now throughout this quarantine pandemic for the coronavirus. How do you feel about it? So now this Self-Care Wednesdays, basically, it's just me, just more so sounding off, talking about certain topics that I feel as though that I want to talk about, on my podcast, and things that has been on my mind. So, I really appreciate all of you for listening to me. Once again, just like I said, you guys continue on amazing me with the stats that you guys are genuinely interested in this podcast. And I appreciate all of the active listeners and all of the new listeners. Yes, you are now listening to the Creative Lips Podcast. And I am your host, Regina. And this is episode 32. Pull up my 32. Like, oh man, we're making it through all of these episodes. We're pushing through, guys. And pretty soon, before you know it, it's going to be my 100th episode. And when that comes, I got something special for you guys. I'm getting all my equipment and everything. So pretty soon, I'm going to be setting up, doing my live versions of my podcast on YouTube, guys. So, be sure to follow me on all my social media. You will be the first to know if and when that happens. Yes. So now I want to get into, just like I said, some of the topics that I want to talk about on, this episode of Self-Care Wednesdays. And, it's just basically talking about how to cope. How are you all coping with this quarantine? I'm just going to basically talk about my personal experience. And once again, I always like to start this off when I talk about different topics when it involves mental health. I am no way, no shape, no form a licensed psychologist or a licensed therapist. This is just strictly from my experience and my own opinion. But you never know. Certain topics and certain things I talk about, it might help you. So keep on tuning in. Yes. And, about being in a quarantine state right now, how are you coping with it? How are we all coping with it? I mean, I can, just talk about my personal my personal way as to how I'm coping with it. Because, quarantining with yourself at home can play an important role in preventing the spread of infectious diseases, this infectious virus. That's why we are in a quarantine state. That's what the government is telling us to do and what the CDC is telling us to do. That's why we are in a pandemic right now. But this doesn't mean that coping with the disruption in your normal routine is easy. Taking care of your mental health is essential. Now, I did a podcast on the steps to take on how we can overcome this, quarantine state through our mental health. So give that a listen, and you can go through some of the steps that you can take. But however, I'm going to take this into a different level. It's just more so me, talking about personal things. And by all means, I would hope that you all would listen to this episode because it's very personal to me. I just want to talk about certain things that I have been experiencing through this quarantine state. So I know I talked to you guys just a little bit about me losing my job. Yes, I am added to the millions and millions of people who got let go from their job during the quarantine. Just like I said, everything happened so fast. I got laid off on March the 13th. And that was when they declared it was a worldwide pandemic around that time. And everything just happened all at once. And it's interesting. I don't know if you all, believe in signs and believe in the universe and your intuition and going off, stuff like that. But however, I can tell y'all what led up to me knowing that everything was going to happen for me in that way. So during that course of that week, I've been experiencing a lot of crazy dreams. Just letting me know that, this was going to happen. Certain dreams were weird, as we all have weird dreams and try to make sense out of them when we wake up in the morning. But the dreams that I was having, dreams of, not making it on time and being, left out. And I really didn't pay attention to those dreams. But in the end, after everything has happened, it just took a toll for the worse with my dreams. I've been awakened with, some dreams were bad. And just like I said, some dreams were, I couldn't really, explain it, I guess. But it was just one night I was asleep. And I normally stay up really, really late, which some of you, I am a night owl. But however, when I was working, I did go to bed in a sufficient enough time, and so that I can wake up in the morning and be on time for work, because I work from 9 to 5. And, but however, it was one night that I was asleep, and all of a sudden I woke up. I was awakened by silence. It was just very quiet. And it's normally quiet because I do not have a TV in my bedroom, because I don't like TVs in bedrooms, because I believe that your bedroom should be your sanctuary and where you come to retreat and rest and recharge and, and just, do those things for yourself. But however, I was awakened to just darkness, like everything was out. Like I normally sleep with a fan on, but however, everything was just off. My time, my clock was off, just everything was just off. And that's why I'm looking around and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I know I paid my damn light bill, you know what I'm saying? And they don't shut stuff off in the middle of the night. And this was, however, around 3. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. It was 3 something in the morning. And how I knew the time was when I had grabbed my phone just to see if, in fact, my phone was charging, is to see what's going on with the power, like what happened. So I'm walking. I went to the restroom, walking around my place. And then that's when I knocked on my son's door. And then I, asked my son, and I was just like, did you know the power went out? And he was asleep himself. And he was just like, no, I didn't know. And then as soon as I said it out of my mouth, the power came back on. Everything just shut back on. The lights and everything startled me. And then I went into the kitchen, and then that's when I looked at the clock on the stove. And I guess it must have had like a safety on the stove to where sometimes when the power goes out on certain appliances and, or certain electronics, you have to reset it all over again. You have to reset the time all over again. But however, I looked at the time, and then that's when I wasn't really paying attention. It said 3 something, and then that's when I was like, okay, the clock didn't change on the stove. I said, that's odd. But then as soon as I walked back to my bedroom, I opened up my door, and I have these lights. These lights, they set off different colors. And it's kind of like a party light, like a strobe light. I mean, you could change it to different features and stuff like that. But I have it when I, do my meditation and, certain things that help set my mood for anxiety, because I used to suffer from really bad anxiety, but the lights help me. It helps set the mood and helps regulate my mental when it comes to meditation and different things, because the different colors and chakras and so forth and stuff like that. But however, as soon as I opened up my bedroom door, guys, I'm telling you, I kid you not, that light was on red. It was literally on the red color. And soon as I opened up the door, I saw that, and it startled me. And then I looked at my clock. Now, just like I told you, now I know if y'all are familiar with electronics, now sometimes when the power goes out or when you just unplug it by accident or whatever, you have to reset the time all over again. But you do get some electronics that has a reset, like a reset button in there inside of it, to where it'll just save the time, I guess, in a certain amount of time. And then when you plug it back in, it's still the same time. But however, it was just odd. But anyway, I opened the door first, just like I said, the color of the light had startled me. And I looked at the clock, and the time was 3:33. Yes, the time was 3:33, guys. 3:33. And when I looked at that, I mean, I can honestly say that 333 is an angel number. Now, I'm going to be talking about different things, just like I said. I don't know if you all are a believer, of the universe and of different things like that as such. But however, I believe in those things. And if it doesn't, if, you don't believe in that, by all means, then don't listen to this episode. But however, altogether, don't listen to me altogether, because this is, what I am about. And this is what my podcast, is talking about, a lot of creative, things. Because just like I always say, I am a creative human being. And my lips are creative, and I have a lot to say. And these are some of the things that I have to say, and what I believe in, and what I love. And now, for those who do not know what 333 means, 333 is an angel number. It symbolizes aid and encouragement. It means that your angels are just nearby, ready to help and reassure you that your plans are going well. And just like I said, all of this happened before I got laid off from my job. And actually, it was the day before, to be exact. The day before this had happened to me, that, all of the light was red. The number 333 was on the clock. And on my phone, I had to look at my phone because I thought I was going crazy. I just thought that literally I was going crazy. I mean, I was just looking around my room, and then I had to fall to my knees. I really did, because I had to fall to my knees and just pray. And just ask God, just ask him. Just ask. And just say, hey, what is going on? What are you trying to tell me? What are you trying to show me? Is it something that I need to know? Is it something that I need to know? Now, the color red is the root chakra. The color red is the color of physical energy, passion, courage, power, will, and desire. The root chakra is stable and grounding. All right, so I saw the color red, and then I saw the numbers 333. So they were trying to warn me. They were basically letting me know what was going to happen in regards to me losing my job and this pandemic of what's to come. And I have been thinking about that day. Not more so the day that I got let go, but I have been thinking about that day that I got those signs that everything is going to change in my world from this day on, and it will never be the same. And it was just, the universe letting me know that they are there throughout every step of the way, and that everything will be fine. And I just look at that each and every day, and I think about it, just like I said. I think about it, and it really, really makes me look at everything in a different level. Like, I look at this being in a quarantine state right now. I look at it in a way to where it is actually answering all of my prayers, everything that I always wanted in my life. I can finally see it. I can finally see all of my hard work and all of the obstacles and all of the challenges and all of the things that I've been through. I can see it. I can see it even clearer now, even better now. My eyes are open. My eyes are open to the point to where I can just say, wow, I see it. I finally see my life. I finally know what I am here to do and why I am here. I finally know it. And it took 45 years for me to see that, but it's worth it. It's worth it. Just like if you all follow me on my social media, I just learned how to sew. I just learned how to use a sewing machine. And I learned it on my own. And of course, with that little bit of help of YouTube, yes, the magical help of YouTube. But however, I learned how to sew, and it has been sitting and sitting and sitting. And with that being said, the reason why it was sitting is because I didn't have any motivation to do it. Because I was in a state of mind back then I was in a quarantine state. Not like how we are, but I was in a quarantine state, meaning I was in a mental quarantine state. I wasn't awakened. I wasn't aware. I didn't know my worth then. I didn't know, I knew that I was smart. I was hella smart. I am hella smart. I mean, I just amaze myself with half of the things that I do. But when your mind is in a quarantine state, and when your mind is in the mental state to where it's locked down, then there's nothing that you can do because you're in that state. You can't get out of it. It's really hard to get out of that quarantine mental state. And that's something that I had to break free from. And that's something that I've been asking the universe for over and over again. I asked the universe for that over and over again, and I prayed and I cried and I got on my knees and I begged and pleaded and asked, and I said, please, I want to break free. I want to be who I am, what you're seeing right now. I want to be a creative. I want to do creative things every day. Every day I wake up from out of my bed, I want to do creative things. And that's what I've been doing. Yes, that's what I've been doing each and every day. You know, taking care of our mental health is an essential. Even if your time in quarantine is, just brief. And we will go out back into the world, even though we have to be forewarned that when we go back out there, it's going to be a whole new world for all of us. The coronavirus outbreak has led many of us to engage in that social distancing. Have we ever sat down to think that this is our time to really focus on ourselves in a critical way? Yes, in a critical way. So that we can not just social distance ourselves so that we can stop the spread of COVID-19, but also just to social distance ourselves from ourselves. we really need to sit down and really think about that. Because this isolation period in our lives, we're going to look back at it. And we are going to say, damn, I needed that shit. I'm so glad that I had that break. And when you all go back to your works and, your job or wherever you do, school, whatever, you're going to look back at this. You're going to be like, damn, I wish I was back in my quarantine state. You get some people that say, oh, no. I know Idris Elba said that. I remember he put a post on his Instagram. He basically said that every year we should mark this as an anniversary and stay home for a whole week in quarantine. And I was reading some of the comments under what he posted, and some people said, this gives me anxiety. This makes me upset. How? Why? What? And I feel as though, like, why not? Because we're going to value this time that we spend time with our families and our loved ones and ourselves, to work on ourselves, to be better and to be productive in this time. Because time seems to creep by much more slowly after we have been home for this long period of time. Even if you are home with your family members, and it gives us time to sit down and really reflect and have those reflections and just reflect on our lives. And also it gives us time to work on ourselves too as well. Now, for the other handful of people, there are some people like myself that sometimes we can get into our head a lot. And I know sometimes, self-doubt does creep in. I am human. And self-doubt does creep in with me, I can honestly say. And sometimes it gets tough. It gets rough. Sometimes I sit up there and I just think like, well, damn. Am I going to find another job? Do I want another job? It's a lot of thoughts come up into my mind. But one thing I can honestly say, that I have a peace of mind right now like never before. Sometimes I remember it was one time that I tried to get back into the dating realm. I said, well, maybe I probably need to date. And that didn't work out because the people that I was talking to had issues of their own. And it's not the fact that I can't sit up there and be sympathetic, but it's like you have a time in your life to where it's just like you know what you want. You know what you're looking for. I know what I want, and I know what I'm looking for. And when those times do creep in, those other times, when we can feel isolated. And then sometimes when you feel isolated, it can lead to poor sleep and poor health. And then that fear, false evidence appearing real creeps in. And then that's something that we have to combat and try our best to shake that shit off. Because we can't we can't function like that. Nobody can function like that when they are depressed and when they feel a sense of loss or a sense of FOMO, fear of missing out. And I think at that time when I started to get back into the dating field, that loneliness crept in. And And I feel as though that it affected my mental just a little bit for me to give in to that temptation of dating. But however, things didn't pan out for me. And then I said, now it's not my time. I pretty much value my space. I protect my energy at all costs. I do. And then when I do give my energy to people, I always let them know that I value my energy, and my energy is a privilege. It is a privilege. And you should be happy that you are actually even talking to me, because I wouldn't talk to you. But however, the possible mental health, can be very, very, very disheartening. And it could really affect you in a bad way. Just like I said, it can be affected in fear, sadness, numbness, insomnia, confusion, anger. And, you can just have an all-around low mood. And, talking about, staying at home. We can talk about some of the stay-at-home mothers, the single mothers out there who are struggling. And I remember as one time in my life, I, just like I said, I was a teenage mother. And I could imagine, back in the day, if I had my children now, say like if it was everything's different, my children are older now. But however, I was thinking about, wow, what if my children were younger? How would I be? How would I be? Almost a quarter of all children in the United States live with a single parent. A higher share than anyone else in the world. And of course, we know that New York was hit the hardest, and New Jersey and some other states. It was hit the hardest with COVID-19. And more than 400, it was stated that more than 425,000 children in the state of New York living with single parents. And of course, added to that is with the economic fallout as well. That is also putting a stress on a lot of households right now. And it's hurting those single parents. It's hurting them. It is. It's hurting them really bad. With the job losses, and then also with them, trying to find food for their children. So, how do we overcome those things? How do we overcome all of those things when you're trying to juggle everything? And then it makes it hard for you to come home and be home all the time, because you're trying to be strong for your children as well. It's really tough. It's really tough. And I can honestly say that I really feel for all of the single mothers out there. There are a lot of people not talking about this. I don't know. I did research on this. I wanted to read about it, before I started talking about certain topics. And I did research about it, and I don't see anyone talking about it. There are some blogs, and there are some podcasts, but this, or some articles, but there is no one really talking about the effects on mental health in single mothers. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because abuse and domestic violence is on the rise. It's on the rise at an alarming rate. Yes, it's on the rise. And how do they get out of it? Families in crisis, it's almost like handling the situation to that abuser on a silver plate. Because you get the mental health of it all with the parents or even the loved ones too, your significant other, with the weight of the world on their shoulders. And they lose their jobs or whatever the case may be. And then they're home each and every day. And then they can use their family as a punching bag or as a verbal bag. There are different steps that you can do to make sure that those different isolation abused situations cannot go unseen. Because what certain victims can do is to create a code word. They can create a code word with family and friends to alert if there is any danger. And then you can also leave your porch light on. You can leave your porch light on. If you turn the porch light on, that could be a sign to your neighbors to call the police if something's going on in your house, if you feel as though that your life is in danger. But what are kids to do? That's it's a silent topic that no one talks about. And this needs to be talked about because it's going to be on the rise even more. It's going to be on the rise even more. And, what else can we do about it? It's to try to talk more about these topics just so that we can get it known out there. And also check on your loved ones, check on your friends, just like I said before. Check on everyone just to make sure that everyone is straight. And then sometimes, we always want to get in our ways and say, I got problems on my own. Yes, I'm right there with you all. But it doesn't, it doesn't help to not do anything. It really doesn't. You really have to put forth the effort just to try our best to try to see if, in fact, our friends are actually crying out for help, or family members or whatever is crying out for help, or they just want attention because, you get that too because they're bored or whatever, and some people want to do stupid shit. But however, just getting back to, everything about being in a quarantine state, I just wanted to just talk about those topics because those things really, really weighed on my heart, because I remember going through a lot of things in my past of going through domestic violence and not having the help. And not having the help that is needed for you so that you can get your shit and get out of that relationship or situation. Nowadays is so much resources, there's so much help out there as opposed to, years ago now. There was a lot of technology out there to find people just to see who that person was. If there was a crime committed, like far as taking DNA and, and so forth. But however, guys, just make sure that you're trying your best to cope through this quarantine status. We're basically trying our best to try to cope with it. because this is happening worldwide. It's not just happening in the U.S. with, abusers and domestic violence. This is happening because the evidence suggests that rates of domestic abuse are up since the outbreak took. And this is happening just like, once again, are worldwide. It was an article that I read, and it was basically this woman. She was talking about her accuser, her abuser. She said, before the quarantine, he would insult me, use slurs, tell me I'm a whore, that I'm kissing other men, but he had never hit me, not until now. Last weekend, he hit me in the head so hard with his fist for the first time. Now, these are true words from a woman. And these are happening all over the world, not just over there in Macedonia, Croatia, and, European countries. It's happening in the U.S. as well. And parents are abusing their children too. I remember I saw on the news is this lady, she killed her child. It's all because he wouldn't eat his breakfast or something like that. Yes, and that was true. And it's on the rise. And we have to be the ones to really, try our best to see what we can do to play a part. We all experience, all of us now, people can say they have a dysfunctional family or a dysfunctional lifestyle. But when you come from a family that, in times of this isolation, it could be greater risk at violence because of the additional stress, frustration, and tension that isolation brings. It can also boost the dysfunctional patterns of the behavior among your loved ones and family members, or, even your, significant abusive partners. Because the violence can become more violence. Once they do it, it can become more. I can honestly say that. That is true. That is definitely true. So, once again, check on your loved ones. Check on everyone just to make sure that everyone is straight. That everyone is straight. And, once again, guys, we will get through this. We will all definitely get through this. Yes, we will all get through that. Whatever situation you are going through, I hope and pray that you will get through. We will all get through. And I know I have to sit up there each and every day and convince myself, not convince, but just tell myself, because I pretty much already know that it's going to happen. And we just have to stay on our toes. We just really have to stay on our toes as much as we can. Yes, as much as we can. All right, guys. So now, if you like that episode, and if you want to hear more of topics and such, then by all means, leave this sister, yes, this sister you're listening to right here, a message on my Instagram at CreativeLipsPodcast, and also follow me on Twitter and leave me a message there too as well at CreativeLipsPod. Yes, do that, guys. Do that. And until next time, be safe, y'all. All right.
Wish I could know how far we could go.
You are now
Yes,
listening
Milan.
to episode 32 of the Creative Lips Podcast.
Yeah.